a negative attitude towards Africa. In San Francisco, on African Liberation Day, Brother Walter Rodney, an African historian, noted both the importance of African Liberation Day in terms of our African identity and some of the root causes for our problem of identification.
Hello, hi guys. Hi everyone who's watching us. So seated here are students of development studies and philosophy from Strathmore University. We are here to discuss the audio archive that we've created around the myth of development and just our experience learning development, our reflections on Walter Rodney's work as well. So I'll allow everyone to introduce themselves and then we can proceed.
Hello, guys. I'm Harriet Ocheng.
What's up? Jafet Miano.
So friends, we've been studying development studies together for 4 years. We have similar experiences. We've read How Europe Underdeveloped Africa for class, yes. So the first question that I would like to ask, just leaning into reflections, is what was your experience studying development studies and philosophy in what's considered the underdeveloped world? What challenges, what opportunities did you see? What has stood out for you over these 4 years? If you could give a basic appraisal of your experience, what would that look like?
Just start. Well, maybe I can give a bit of background as to why I did the development and how I thought it was. So for my A-level high school, I did economics, I did government politics, and then I did IT. And going into uni, I said development is the direction that I want to follow. Going into the course, maybe I'll say disclaimer, in the university that I was taught, which just said is Strathmore. I had way more expectations in the sense that I wanted to learn more about the nitty-gritty, the processes, how the economies of developing worlds and developed worlds differ, and how it is that we can get to the point that they are at, or do we have to follow the same path that they did, just sort of those things. I also wanted to know and to understand like the social implications other than just the economic implications of following the same path that the developed world followed. So after 4 years, I can't really say that I've been 100% content with how I have learned the course. However, my own personal studies and also differences in the workplace has actually gone ahead to broaden my horizons, if I can say. The answer to how has it been studying development in a developing world? I mean, I guess this is the reason why we have the course, in order to, kind of understand how to make our countries better, holistically, and meaning in the whole economic, social, political kind of way. So I guess maybe if I was in a developed world, I'd be looking at the developing world like some sort of poverty-stricken environment. But being in the developing world, learning about developing the developing world, I guess I've gotten some insights. Yes.
So basically, I stumbled upon this course because I wanted to do law when I was younger, but when I finished, my grades weren't that good, So I just had BDP, and looking back at the 4 years, I wouldn't do anything else, because it's imezalisha yani ndani yangu hii urge ya know better, you know. Like, I'm more inquisitive now when I look at, let's say I'm watching the news and probably this head of state is talking about how he wants to grow his country and whatnot. You know, like you look at things from a different perspective because this is what people depend on, like each and every day. The growth, the development, better structures, better policies, working policies, you know. And us guys are really lucky because we've had a first hand experience of understanding how a working nation should be, you know, and how far us guys are from where we're supposed to be. So basically, like I said, I wouldn't want to do anything else because now I know, you know, I want to change the world, and now I know how I can change the world, you know. And I've met wonderful people along the way as well, you know. You guys. But all in all, studying this course in a developing country, you get to understand that there's some privileges us guys don't have, you know. And probably for the coming generations, we'd want to put certain things in place, you know. So yeah, basically that.
Okay, my situation was almost similar to Muredi's. I wanted to do economics. I was like, I'm a good person in maths, I'm smart, I know calculus, I know everything. And then when I reached A-level maths, I got into a class where people were more smarter than me. People were getting answers faster than me. I was in a class with Indians, and I'm like, I don't even understand the formula. And I was like, no, I can't do economics. Because my units were economics, government and politics, geography, and maths. And so I went to my career advisor. I told him I don't understand maths. I was like, this is not for me. Baby girl, me cannot anymore. And so, soft life. So he told me there's a course called International Development. But it was offered in universities. That's what the name of the course in UK, in Canada. But I came back and learned in Kenya. So I came back here, looked for the course that was similar to it, and I found it. One experience I would say is different is my learning experience, my A-level experience. Let's say it gives me a perspective. Africa is very underdeveloped, seriously underdeveloped. Like, it's like brainwashes you to think like, what? Aki nimetoka nchi gani? So I feel like when they were teaching me that, they made me feel like I need to go home and develop my country. What are they telling me? Yeah. So, but now thinking about it, I've learned for 4 years. My lecturers have given me a different perspective. Let's say I didn't know the institutions like around the Kenyan government, the protocols. I didn't know. I was taking the knowledge I've known from other institutions to Kenya. I can't say Kenya is perfect, but they literally undermined us like we don't know anything. I feel like my lecturers have given me a perspective whereby I'm knowing more. I'm like, Kenya, there's a problem here, but if this happens, we can fix it. For them, it's like it can't be fixed. That's my thought.
Wow. How did I start doing development studies? Well, my mother is very African. So when I decided that, or rather when I managed to get the marks required to enter campus, I went and told my mom that I wanted to do psychology. She asked where, and I was like, USIU. It's like, sawa. A day later, she came back and she's like, you have the option of doing development studies and philosophy in Strathmore University. It's like, I don't know what that is. I don't know what's that, you know? And I believe in the 4 years in development studies and philosophy, everyone has that. No one knows what exactly development studies is, or rather what development actually means. So I did my research a bit, and I was like, okay, let me try it out. And the first semester, and actually all through my studies, I think development studies needs to be taught in every campus, actually in high school. I think people really need to be more aware of the things that we know. I think the 4 years studying development studies has made me, like Moredi said, has opened my eyes to different perspectives of what development is and how, or rather our role in development. And it's funny, we were in Twitter with Harriet, and we were talking about how currently, the different political manifestos. And we're like, from a development studies student, from someone who is looking at what our leaders are bringing up as development practitioners, I would say it is actually quite sad. All the propagandas and whatnot, all the beautiful manifestos that will take the country nowhere. I think people need to learn development studies so that they can be able to even interrogate their leaders better. Yes.
All right. I will also give my perspective. So I was gonna be a doctor. Yeah. Not a human doctor, not a veterinary doctor. I was gonna be a doctor. I knew I wanted to be a doctor since I was 12. But a bunch of things happened towards the end of my education. I too did A-levels, and what Harriet said about just how we look at our country, and I think it instilled in me a sense of a savior complex, which I am still unlearning. Which this project in itself has called me to unlearn and to learn communal ways of building. So after I did my A-levels, I realized I didn't want to be a doctor. I just wanted to help people. And I was like, how can I help people? My friend had done this degree before she was in the first class that graduated with from development studies and philosophy. And I was like, okay, looks interesting. Development studies, helping people, philosophy. I like reading, thinking. So let me do that. So that's how I end up here. Over the 4 years, it's been an interesting journey. Of course, we've been together. We fought in class. We've had differences in opinion, but I think we've helped each other, as Mureithi has said, to widen our perspectives and in how we think and how we articulate our thoughts. So I would like to ask you guys one more sub-question to question number one. What was your favorite unit in the 4 years? And what challenges what's the greatest challenge you think you faced over the 4 years of studying this degree, living where we live? I think for me, the thing was having this information and not being able to actively work on doing things until the pandemic came and people came up with concepts of mutual aid, and I was able to plug in and help there. But I think for me, that was the biggest challenge, because when we learned about, say, something like structural adjustment programs, I really wanted to shout it from all the rooftops, and I was wondering, how comes we don't talk about these things? We need to talk about these things and the effect it had on the development trajectory, Kenya's development trajectory, and countries in the global south generally. So if you could tell me, and my favorite unit, of course, was African philosophy, as all of you know. So we can start with Nyano.
Okay, my favorite unit by far was emerging issues.
Emerging issues.
Oh yeah, in development, actually in Kenya. Most notably, actually, during that time, I remember 3/4 of that class was about the BBI, and I remember we really tear it into pieces. And really, by that I mean that it was interesting analyzing a document like that, like the BBI, and what it means to Kenya. And really, like I said earlier, seeing how much the information that we have, if other people could have that information, during that period in time, a lot of people was like, yes, BBI is great, yes, the amazing aspects of BBI. But then interrogating it as classmates, we all disagreed, but from a different perspective. We looked at it at or finance, how the financial impact will be, or rather what the financial impact, the ethos and the morality of some of the things that we're trying to bring up. So it was very interesting to see that play around, and also talking about the American election and contrasting it with the Kenyan politics, and seeing the positives on our side and negatives and positives on their side.
Now that you've talked about the BBI, can you tell us the one thing that, because I remember our classes were very interactive, so Miano was presenting on the BBI. So can you tell us the one thing that really ilikukasirisha kabisa, the one thing that really irritated you about the BBI, or the one thing that you are like, okay, this makes sense?
I'd say when you look at the BBI as a document as a whole, yeah, it is, and I remember commented about it, it is a lot of rubbish, but has been put in very colorful, packaging, yeah, which is a lot of the things that we receive as Kenyans from politicians. It's a lot of things that do not make sense. However, it's packaged so nicely that you believe that, yes, this will really help me. But the truth of the matter, no, it won't. For example, one of the things that I really didn't like was the increase of parliamentarians, and also the introduction of the ombudsman and other officers. I thought that was going into the judicial autonomy. That aside, I also had a problem with the prime minister issue. Like, why do we need a prime minister? Why does he need 4 other deputies? I thought, or rather, my belief is that document, a lot of it, like the 35% increment in funds that's supposed to go to the counties, that can be done without a constitutional change. But the fact that you're hiding your true intentions, your true motives of wanting something that rather increase in seats, which needs a constitutional change, the fact that you're hiding that underneath, and glorifying it with the money so that you can get people, I think looking at it and interrogating BBI from that perspective really gave me a very good look into the politics of this country. Yeah.
And I think that's very, like, I like that, because it ties in very well to what we're attempting to do with this project, how we're lending ourselves, even the name, the myth of development, aka Vako za Uradi. We really are trying to interrogate that aspect of how a lot of policy and a lot of change is how it's disguised, what language, what mythologies are created to put forward these ideas, such as thinking with Walter Rodney, whose work this project is based on, when he talks about underdevelopment being a relationship of oppression between a relationship of oppression and exploitation. How do we conceptualize underdevelopment, like living in the underdeveloped world, So thank you for highlighting that, the language and the stories told to hide the truth about what's happening. And the question was your favorite unit throughout the 4 years, and challenges that you faced.
Mine is a bit weird, let's say, because my favorite unit right now is what I'm practicing. Let's say it. In school, when we were learning monitoring and evaluation, I was just like, what in the hell is this? Like, who? And let's say the lecturer's charisma wasn't amazing. So I was just like, what is this? But I was like, this is interesting, but it was not giving interesting, let's say that. But I say right now that is what I love. But in school it was CRED, comparative regional economical development. It was so nice learning things about different countries. Let's say I did not know, especially me, I was doing a part called Oceania. Let me tell you guys, I didn't even know there's a place called Oceania. What? Where is Oceania? And there are countries there. Hey, I was like, what? This is happening? People are going to this. There are islands. Oceania is Australia and islands next to Australia. There's Fiji, there's Kiribati, there's New Zealand. Yeah, there's a lot of islands there. So I like it because it exposed me to other people's information. And I believe like in this world, you shouldn't be closed-minded, but open-minded. Okay, a challenge that I face like right now is about, let's say, the aspect of open-mindedness. Especially development studies exposed me in the sense of, let's say I was a person who's like, if I'm doing something like this, I'm doing it like this. You can't tell me to do it another way. But development studies exposed me in a way, this happens, Arid. This also happens. What are you saying this happens? And it made me take into account when I'm wrong. And I feel like there's no sense of open-mindedness, especially right now after we've come from elections. People are still, if you listen to people's views on social media, everywhere, it's a bit in a fanatic way. No one is reasoning in the sense of, even if someone supported this, you need to say, yeah, but my leader is wrong for doing this. You can't just say, no, shut up. And something someone has said is so offensive. I feel like there's a sense of open-mindedness that needs to, I don't think it should even be a unit. Have open-mindedness. It's like having common sense. Because some people just go and do courses, but they don't know. They don't want to respect other people's opinions. They want to state, this is how I live my life, and you can't tell me any other way. So that's a major challenge. I feel like open-mindedness has been a really big thing I've seen, especially right now.
You know me, I like to fight with you. There's something I picked up when you were speaking, and I'm not disputing anything, and maybe I'm digressing a bit, but I just wanted to respond to what you said. But we're not going to have a back and forth, promise? I agree with you, actually. I did agree with you most of the times when we were talking about BBI and all that.
It always starts like that.
No, but I did, though. I've what you talked about, the Office of the Ombudsman and them seeming like they were kind of impeding on judicial powers. Well, with the organizations that I currently work with, who specialize in mitigating electoral violence and promoting cohesion, I actually did a couple of trainings with the Ombudsman Office, and their role is not particularly to be involved in the judicial process in as much as it is to sort of like listen to the grievances from the grassroots before you get to the Supreme Court. Like how much money do you need to get before you get to the Supreme Court before you're heard out? Or you go to Milimani and you live in Milimani for how many years? So that was like what I've gotten to understand now as well. The role of the Office of the Ombudsman. And now we're not having a back and forth, and I'm not going to reply. Now to answer Lisa's question. My favorite subject, my favorite unit, yeah, just as Harriet said, actually there were two: the comparative regional economic development and globalization and development. Mostly because I like to understand processes, and I like to point out, like, I'm that one friend who's so annoying because it'll be like, so why did you think you should wear the blue trouser and not the black? Yeah. So I like to do that, like, in processes, whether it's politically, whether it's about your culture, whether it's about your economic status, how you're impacting another country with the decisions that you make, and how overall things like structural adjustment programs and tide aid come to hinder the development of other countries. So those two in particular were the more interesting units. And then the one that I didn't like is everything that had to do with philosophy. Except from African philosophy, I didn't like that one. But everything else to do with philosophy, like, I just wasn't understanding. Maybe it's Lisa said earlier, I don't like to read. She said I only like to read Dambi Samoyo. So maybe that's why the philosophy units were not my favorite, except from African philosophy and political. No, the one for this is science.
Philosophy of science.
That one also had the potential to be a nice unit, but it had the potential. I think the content was interesting, maybe it's just not the particular content I wanted to learn about, but then again, you can't pick and choose what exactly you want to learn when you, yeah. Sorry.
So, my favorite unit was African philosophy, to be honest, because from that unit, I got to understand that like everything built in the West had its roots, had its roots in Alexandria. Like in Alexandria, basically we had the Library for Africa, Sindio. So knowledge from the south, from the east, from the west, ended up in Alexandria. So what these guys basically did, and you remember when we were told about the rigorous course you had to go through to become an Egyptian priest, and how Socrates was the only white person to ever go through that process, and he didn't even he didn't even figure the end, So it just shows that, man, Africa or the civilization, like, who are so far ahead of everybody else. Like what these guys have done, basically they've caught wametufikia tu, But now in hindsight, we live in a reality where Africa is underdeveloped. Africa is nothing works in Africa. It's a dark continent. But like, honestly speaking, these guys came and they saw everything that was on this continent, and they thought that they were the first people to stumble upon it. That's just the worst. That's just the worst thing a white person can think. Because this is our shit. We own these things. So basically, again, coming up, I'd love basically to to make sure that African resources are used by Africans, and the profits are distributed among Africans. Yeah, so African philosophy was my best. My worst unit. Okay. I had a lot of bad units. Honestly speaking, especially the attachments don't count, no? But basically it's cause if I didn't like how how the lecturer was, I nilikuwa na prejudice too. Yani, I wouldn't wake up early. I wouldn't contribute in class. So yeah.
I like what you're saying about knowledge, because it's what we discussed in episode 4 of this archive, which is arts, culture, education, and folklore. And even looking at, you've highlighted it very well when Walter Rodney talks about the West. The West was built through the expatriation of labor, labor through the slave trade, natural resources through colonization, and then knowledge, even all our knowledge systems, which of course Cheikh Anta Diop really goes deeply into that in his book. Unfortunately, I can't remember the title. Yeah, and I think it was really important studying African philosophy to kind of look at these. Look at canon and see people who look like us. To look at work that's discussed all over around the world, and to see people that look like us. I think for me, the one thing that actually hurt me the most was that we did only one unit of African philosophy, and we did it at the end of our degree. My feedback was that we should have had for each of the philosophy units, when we're looking from ancient philosophy to contemporary philosophy, my 2 cents is that we should have had a comparative section after, because having African philosophy at the end, even though we see African philosophy was born out of struggle, out of the search for self, and as a part of the decolonial project, I think that there's room for more research, of course, so that we can also have the work to do comparative analysis, say between Descartes and Zara Yacoub, who are alive at the same time. But we don't have work by Zara Yacoub in the mainstream, or finding it would be extremely difficult. So question number 2. So we're thinking about Kenya, and we live in Kenya, which is considered the global south in Africa, underdeveloped. One of the ideas to spur development has been public-private partnerships, and also privatization of like public goods to make delivery better, to make delivery better. I would like to pick your brains on your thoughts on that. You can use specific case studies from Kenya of like development projects that you've seen that really didn't make sense, or anywhere else. So I'd like to pick your brains on that particular issue, whether privatization is the way to go for development.
Okay, so I'll give example from Kenya, personally. And this is an insight I watched from a Citizen TV news. It was the time Kibaki died. There were certain, I forgot the names of the people who were there, but I remember Mutai Kagwe was there, and I forgot who else. And they were trying to compare his rule and Moi era's rule. If you know Moi, it was more... everything was mostly owned by the government compared to Mwai Kibaki's era. And if you look, Kenya's economic development and growth occurred more during Kibaki's era, and that was when people were introduced to bank accounts. That's when equity was formed, and people were like, you can open a bank with 100 Kenya shillings. Because before, people were storing their money in suitcases. Moi had never introduced that to the system. So that was privatization. And the economic aspect of when people are saving more in banks, it's increasing the economic growth for the country. So I would agree with the privatization part. However, the problem with privatization now comes with the normal effect, or the economic terms, market failure. It happens everywhere. There's obviously a monopoly. And then also the government is a bit choosy. Even when they privatize, then there's normally like companies they want to make succeed more than others. So you'll find a company has a monopoly in one area. Therefore, the truth is the people who are struggling and building up their startup companies can't enter. The market is not conducive for them to enter. So I would say privatization has helped in the sense of it has helped build economic growth. Look at Mwai Kibaki's time and Moi's era time. There's a big difference. However, there's choosiness. Only specific people are chosen. Even when this privatization occurs, capital to start the company, a few people are chosen. See, every time you hear who owns this bank, see ni ule kazi na ule politician, see ni ule, because the money is still running under the same people. So even if it's privatized, you've had economic growth can occur in a country, but it only happens in one sector. It doesn't happen in every sector. So let me say the privatization has helped only in one sector, and it hasn't helped in other sectors. There's a monopoly in a lot of places. Like, I don't understand why, like, you guys know, like, there are companies where, Brookside, Brookside, you've never had it fail. It's been there, and it's always been there. But other companies, they come up, they fail, and it shows like there's different types of funding and starting up of businesses that more companies are given a more advantageous approach than others. Yeah, that's my thought.
What will I say about privatization? You see, the way as youth, I don't know whether you've had this in reference to the male species, but if he wants, he will. So I'll use the same argument for our government. If the government wants, it will. Like, the problem is, as a society, we don't recognize that the government can really pull through at times. And I'll give an example of Kenya Meat Commission. Kenya Meat Commission is one entity that the government took hold, the government gave to the army, but it's working. Privatization, I have my doubts, I have my questions about it, but I believe that one problem with privatization is, like Harriet mentioned, is that who is it benefiting? yes, we may get profits. Yes, profits might come in, but who's going to benefit from privatization of some companies like KQ, like Kenya Meat Commission and its own, like a lot of the different industries that we have, the clothing and whatnot? Does it need privatization? And then who's benefiting from this? I think the point at which we ask ourselves who is supposed to benefit and see how we are able to benefit the most people, whether it's privatization or letting the government service the citizens, I think that's when I will be able to give an accurate judgment on whether privatization works in Kenya or not. But as for now, I'm not so still sure because I still haven't gotten a government that works properly, you know. She mentioned about she mentioned about the Kibaki's era. So we saw a government that put policies in place, you see, that work. So some of the things which we say, some of the situations that we see now, should the government let go of some companies? Should the government control some companies? NHIF, NSSF, among other companies, yeah? My question, fundamental question is who's benefiting? Is it for the greater good or is it for individual good? Individual good, no. And for all intents and purposes, this country is too corrupt. I think too corrupt to really be able to take privatization for what it is and for it again to benefit everyone else. I think we're not yet there. Going there, but not yet there.
I'd just maybe like to start with some literature for like reference.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, tell them. In Amilcar Cabral's The Weapon of Theory, he begins to talk about the inherent problem in our economic as well as our political systems. And the main issue, rather the main problem, is we do not understand our history. And so we cannot have politicians who don't understand our history being the people who are doing critical thinking for us. If at all they did understand the history, they would understand that as Africans, we're a community. Not to necessarily say that we are all socialist or everyone is Pan-African or what, but then we understand that at the root of a country, of a nation, is the community. So then there's no way we would start privatizing anything if we're talking about a community. So then we have Thomas Sankara, for example, who was assassinated, reasons why we don't know yet, ever. But he is the one who introduced things such as mass vaccination. Yeah, mass vaccination. Such things which are now privatized. Like, how difficult was it for you to get the first jab of the COVID-19 vaccine? Before now, they decided, okay, now we'll give it to all the hospitals and we'll give it to all the schools and what. How difficult was it at first? But that's healthcare. You can't privatize healthcare because that's a public good. You can have a private hospital, but then you cannot privatize something that is inherently an incessant need for the citizens in the country. So I'm very much against privatization of goods that are supposed to be public. Education, unless now you're going to a private school. But then a public school cannot be asking a child in a private school, a child in a public school to provide the certain things that a child in a private school can provide because it's a public good. Hospital as well. You cannot expect me to be paying for my NHIF. Why am I even paying for my NHIF? But then you cannot expect me to be paying for my NHIF. And then when I want to get admitted, you're like, okay, but then also you need to add on top. No, it's a public good. It's supposed to be for the benefit of the public. But then if we go to things such as Coca-Cola, the MNCs and the TNCs, yes, they have a very dangerous impact to developing countries in the sense that they bring too much competition to the domestic industries. So we cannot further our own development. We keep on paying this money back to countries that are not our own. I don't necessarily have a very big issue with that because then again, going back to what Amicla Cabral said, we have politicians who don't understand our history, so they cannot critically think for us. So if you invite all the MNCs and all the TNCs to come into your country, I mean, one way or another, something is going to happen that you didn't want. And that goes now to things such as, oh, we don't have the labor force, oh, we don't have enough skilled workers, or we have enough skilled workers, but then we don't have skillful jobs left to do. So I guess like there's a flip of the coin in every way you look at it, but more so in whatever good you're looking at, whether it's the public good or whether it's the private goods, the luxuries and all that. That's what I think. Also, what Harriet said about barriers to entry, yeah, I also agree. Like, there's too many barriers to entry with privatization because of the monopolies. You cannot go out, you cannot come in. There's no money, there's no capital, there's no labor. Just yeah, that I agree with as well.
Privatization. This is a very big concept, especially in the developing world, and it depends on what side of the spectrum you sit on in regards to communism, socialism, and capitalism. So if you're a capitalist, let's say, you'll tend more towards privatization. And if you're a socialist or a communist, these are state-owned organizations, you know. So at the end of the day, it depends on which school you subscribe to. And personally, as a socialist, I think that, like TK said, there's some things that once privatized work better, and other things that just need to be under the care of the government. But at the same time, like all of us are saying, we have a government that does not work. You know, many African governments don't work. So whether we privatize or whether it remains state-owned, the corruption there will kill the company, you know. So at the end of the day, we also have to remember that some of the MNCs and the TNCs that come to our country fund the government in one way or another, you know. So basically, I heard that BAT finances the crackdowns for marijuana peddlers in Kenya. So such a thing that is done by this company just shows you that they want more people to smoke. They banned Lyft and they want to ban the vapes. You know, it just shows that there are certain companies that only have vested interest in their well-being. So yeah, I basically think that some things, especially now, should be privatized, but some things should remain like under the state. Yeah.
Also, just to add or to note, it's always important, like our lecturer used to say, to distinguish what you're really bringing. What is your goal? To grow economically or to develop economically? And then when now you decide what it is that you're privatizing, you have to have a goal in mind. We can decide to privatize construction, all of it, and we know our infrastructure will be better. And we're doing this with the aim of economic growth, but then at the end of the day, it will bring in economic development. But there are some things when you just privatize, it's neither bringing growth nor development. So there needs to be a discussion where all these things are clearly thought out and the policies that are brought about make sense, not only to the electorate, but also to the international world, because they'll do investment here. What is it that we really want them to invest here before they take over our country in the name of investing, in the name of foreign aid?
Okay, because you've brought it up, I think everyone here understands the distinction you make when you say economic growth and economic development. But could you give us a distinction?
I'll just say layman terms, though I used to write in the exam. Well, economic growth is basically centered around money. So it's centered around your gross domestic product, your aggregate demand. So that's how much the government is spending, how much investments are being made into the country, how many exports and imports are coming in and going out, the consumption in the country. That's economic growth. Economic development, however, is multidimensional. It has to do with life expectancy, the level of education in a country, mortality rates, such things. Like also happiness in the country measured with the happiness index. Yeah. So development is more in touch with what the people need and who the people are. Well, economic growth is just where we are ranking there in the charts.
Okay. So thank you all for your responses. I just what all of you have said has me thinking about a couple of things. One, the idea of inequality, because with Miano's question around who benefits from the privatization, who does it work for? When we say the government doesn't work, or when some people say the government is working, what do they? Who exactly? Who is the government working for? And the government is supposed to work for all of us, which we know is not the case because of the high levels of inequality in our country. It takes me to a quote from one of the episodes, episode 5, Community is All We Have, written by Karitha Kirimi, where she says, development isn't champagne for the few, but water for everyone. Basic amenities, the common good for everyone involved. Everyone, all of us, because we're stakeholders, shareholders in this our country. And another thing, thank you, Tamara, for introducing Amilcar Cabral's The Weapon of Theory, because I think it also points a lot to the work that we're trying to do here, the link between development and African heritage, that we need to know our histories. We need to our histories need to be accessible. They can't just be in a museum or in an archive. It needs to be knowledge for everyone. And that's one of the ways we explore how the West underdeveloped Africa through the ideas of individualism and capitalism applied to knowledge systems, creating an elite. Even in the academy, I say that as people... we say that as people who have been through institutions of higher learning, but also seeing how that system in itself is also elitist and Western skewed with regard to what we learn and how we think. Yes, sorry. I think Thank you, guys. But I think what we've captured mostly around the issue of privatization is the idea of inequality and the idea of governments working. Miano boldly claimed that our government is corrupt. Privatization cannot work for us because we're corrupt. So I think this discussion has helped us see that the issues may be bigger than the idea of private-public partnerships. And I'd just like I'd like anyone, if you want to respond, how if there's a link, and if you see the link between PPPs and certain theories of development, I keep on forgetting. It's interesting that you mentioned BAT, because BAT is British America Tobacco, which is owned by our former colonizer. Let's think of the neo-colonial dependency theory of how the West is even now still expatriating resources for their development, while heavily impacting the economies here in the global South. So that's my thought on PPPs and development theories. I think personally, it's just an extension of the dependency theory. Yeah.
Okay. In response to TK's best theory, the SAPs, structural adjustment programs, where basically during the Cold War, many failing government bodies were privatized, in order to adjust the economies of the country so that they may survive. So we have such theories. Whether they work, we leave it to them. But honestly speaking, we've seen a lot of structural adjustment programs that have crippled many African economies, especially those that tended towards communism. There's a huge war in Africa. The capitalists waged a huge war in Africa against anybody who else who tried to think differently. So that was the era of the coups and whatnot. So again, we find that there's so many dynamics that go into adjusting an economy or privatizing an entity. And these dynamics, some of them are not just economical, they're political. They bring with them different ideologies. If you think about Kenya and where we are headed, Kenya is about to become a safe space for everybody, regardless of your creed, your religion, or your sexual orientation. So we are getting there, Lisa. We are getting there. I don't say. We are, and anybody who's blind to that fact, isn't welcome in the future world or where we are headed to. Yes, TK. Do you fight me? Yeah. So basically, I also feel like in the next 8 years, so that Kenya can get to the Vision 2030, we'll have a lot of adjustments in our economy, and I'm just curious on what sectors will be most hit. Is it transport? Is it agriculture? Because again, we think about things like coffee, we think about things like tea, our basic cash crops, and how there's a lot of politics around how they're handled and dispersed to the different parts of the world, just to come back packaged as Nescafe and Mark Coffee and whoever else thinks that they can get away with such things. So yeah.
Tamara, I want this question is for you because Mureithi, you mentioned tea and coffee, and I know your research project was based on the tea and coffee farmers and the inequalities, like disparities between the profit for the MNCs and TNCs as opposed to the profit for the individuals who are growing the actual crops. I would like to also call your attention to the idea of cash crops, because these are crops just grown for cash crops grown for the money, crops grown to enter the market. One of the communities we highlight in episode 5 is the Maragua, the Maragua women farmers who uprooted coffee plants to grow food crops, because it wasn't a process that was making sense. They were growing the coffee, but the profits were being split between the husbands and the TNCs, and the women of course who are left with children to feed were left. Yes, thank you. I lost the word. Were left disadvantaged, which also looks at the role of the role of women in development, and the role of development being, I think when I use development, I mean progress for the most number of people in a certain area. So even they reclaiming back their land, reclaiming back this resource that is theirs by uprooting the cash crops and growing food crops for their communities. I think that's really powerful. That's a powerful spirit to move with around community. But the truth is that that's in opposition to something else, opposition to exploitation. In opposition to exploitation. So anyway, Tamara, I've not asked a question. Yeah, I would just like you.
What exactly were you bringing my attention to?
I was bringing your attention to
but the whole coffee situation.
Yeah, could you tell us more about that?
I think it was about maybe 2 months ago. Again, I checked the prices of the coffee berries, how much they were being paid, how much the farmers were being paid, and just last year when I was doing the dissertation, farmers were like so excited that they were finally being paid a mere 120 shillings per bag. And I was like, no, what do you mean? So if say I bring 50 bags, like, do you know that does not even cover how much money that I spent to first of all buy the berries, and then buy the seeds to plant them, to harvest, to disinfect, to now transport them to the market. So that's an area where has actually been very privatized. But then what some new developments that were happening, however, should have been happening from before, is the new regulations with the cooperatives, the coffee cooperatives for tea as well as for coffee, whereby there are some counties in Kirinyaga, I think, in Kirinyaga and Embu were being sort of like subsidized for their fertilizers and as well as their pesticides. I mean, did I really think that was a very effective move? I don't think so, because there's so much more money that they need. It's just not with the fertilizers and the pesticides. So that is also an example of an industry that in relation to the Maragua women farmers, that people should have a look at that industry, because it cannot be where our source of exports are coming from is where the actual farmers are going through the worst financial times. Is that a sufficient answer to your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like to everyone else also. I don't know if you saw what the policy about banning the sharing of indigenous seeds, the seed sharing. It happened earlier this year, I think I saw it on the news. And what, like, I don't know, my 2 cents on that is that I think that's like a prime example of privatization, because the seed sharing is something that's been done by communities for such a long time. Even I think there's an example where Kamba women used to put seeds in baskets to just have as a store during famine. And so seed sharing is an indigenous technology that's been used to shelter communities against times of hardship. So when we have these policies that are limiting seed sharing and needing the farmers to buy from specific one specific seeds from specific companies, that to me looks like that is privatization, and the impact it has on the indigenous communities is quite large, because then in times of drought and famine, there's no food security. Who helps these communities when the government doesn't help? When the government doesn't help them, communities on the fringes, like in northeastern Kenya. So I'm just wondering, what did you guys think about that? Because I think that really broke my heart. When I saw it, it really broke my heart to see policy that's only working to see policy put above the needs of the people. Yeah. Anyone else? Thoughts?
Policy above the needs of the people. You see, I think the one major problem that we have in Africa, and in particular in Kenya, is we try so much to be like the West. And it's something I saw in the discussion that you're having, that development is seen as being Western. Yeah? If you're not modern, if you're not looking like the West, then you're not developed. And a question that was asked in one of the episodes, actually episode 1, is, what does development mean? I honestly believe that when we understand what development means to Kenyans, what it means to be, or rather, once the politicians are able to sit down, put their individual thoughts and beliefs aside, and ask themselves one huge question: what do Kenyans need? Yeah, there's something I saw in a meme trending was he gathered cleaned toilets and sold to fruits and did what and still was not elected as governor. And what first in my head was, what do Kenyans need? If not service, if that's not what Kenyans need. Kenyans don't need a leader who, for the show, sees like they are doing some service. Yeah. So what in particular does Kenya need? So coming back now to your question, I think the point at which we're able to understand the individual needs that we have as a country and respect it for it and try and meet those needs, I think then we'll be able to understand whether now questions like privatization, whether that's a good way to go or not. To some elements, like you mentioned, there are some places where it works, there are some places where it doesn't work. Tamara mentioned that in schools and hospitals, that's not where you need to be having privatization. Then again, I'll ask, many questions, philosophy. I would ask, okay, you have a company, a foreign company. You've mentioned Coca-Cola, you've mentioned BAT, and you've mentioned the coffee industry. Then we're asking ourselves, like now for the coffee industry, what do we need as Kenyans? What does the Kenyan coffee industry need? Not what does the international market need, is what does specifically the Kenyan farmers, what do they need? Can we supply that? Privately, can we supply that with our own mechanisms? Can Mureithi be able to start a factory in Kirinyaga and then start processing that coffee? Why do we have to now wait for these big companies? And it's very interesting you mentioned about the 120 shillings that goes to the coffee farmers, but that's cheaper than a bag of Nescafe, than a tin of Nescafe. That's cheaper than a tin of Nescafe. And I remember in the course of our learnings, we kept on asking ourselves, so why is it we're not profiting? We're not getting any profits from all these proceeds. We are producing all this, and we've talked here about neo-colonialism. I think the point at which we realize what is Kenyan, what's authentically Kenyan, then we'll be able to reach the levels of development that the West is thinking about. I think personally, yes.
I beg to differ. Not to differ. I don't want to differ, but I just want to posit an idea. I think where we're at now as Kenya, specific to Kenya, we're a very young democracy, so that means we have a long way to go and a lot of things that we can achieve and potentially achieve. But then, how do we then get ourselves out of this fix where we're already living in a very globalized world? Yeah. So how do I pull out from the agreement that I've possibly had with this other country that I'm going to supply you this, we're going to do a comparative advantage here. You're going to supply me this and I'm going to supply you that. So how do I just wake up one day and decide, you know what, I actually don't think this agreement of ours is going to work. We need to divorce this plan right now. I feel like it's always easy to say, but these politicians, they should know what to do. Not that I'm agreeing with them. It's always easy to say, but these politicians, they should know what to do. I thought you went to school, you're an economist, you don't know how to... But then, how far can this politician go to undo the damage that was already done, say maybe 2008 when there was the global recession? And then, how can they undo what was done, how many years ago was that? 12 years ago? Then come back here now and then move forward and... not discredit, but more not involve the West, or maybe they say we only want to deal with African countries, but who in particular say that African countries want to deal with other African countries? Case in point, we still need a visa to go to these African countries. So how sure are you that once you have gotten what Kenyans needs, I would say, it's our labor force. The problem is we don't have labor laws. And so what we're going to do is we're going to abolish all these MNCs and TNCs that are in our country. Then we're going to establish domestic industries, and that's how we're going to go from there on. But then how are we only going to make money from the consumption of the citizens? Is that the only way that the country is gonna get money? Because at the end of the day, we still do need money. So, like, that's just my question. Not disagreeing, just a question.
Okay, mine is a bit, it's similar to what Tamara said, but now mine is focusing on how what you said about policies are over the individuals. If you look, I feel like capitalism has been brainwashed in so many of us, and so it's a part of how we reason and how we go about life. So let me say in terms of where I work, we deal with informal settlements. Personally, I've never gone to, this was like the first time I've gone and interacted with people from like, yeah, the informal settlements. And now it was asking them about leadership. You complain about you're not going to work, and then we ask them one question. If an MCA comes to run in your community, mwenye ametoka na wewe from farm, hata ni mtu wa boda tuseme, there was someone who was running, it was in Korogosho. The MCA, there was a boda guy running for MCA. And if you ask these people, why did you not vote for the person? They say, no, he doesn't have money. We want someone with money, someone who's going to put money into us. And you've seen how that's already a capitalistic view. Like, what if that the boda guy is the one who knows the real problems? The MCAs that they vote for is not the person who's lived there. They just vote for that person because akona pesa. Akiwa na rally, atatutolea do. Muhisha atatutolea do. And if you reason like that, at the end of the day, it comes back to bado capitalism. Like, everyone anaangalia pesa, badala angalie the end goal. Like, hata kama nikipewa tuseme 1,000 sahi, hiyo 1,000 itanisaidia. Squeeze hata 1,000. 10k nikae ni 1,000 squeeze na economy. So nasema venye, as in, I think tunafaa ku-unlearn. When I talked to them, I was like, mbona unavotia mtu juu ya pesa? Mtu 5 years later, atakuwa tunakuongelesha. Maybe mtu wa boda ataenda huko ang'ang'ane na nyinyi, aseme mashida zenu, aseme this is happening. Alafu create maendeleo better than huo mtu mwenye anaishi Karen na ni MCA wa Korogo. Does that even make sense? Ajui mashida, anajua mashida za watu go through. Waka unlearn, wakasema, by the way, that's how sometimes utasaidia abolish the policy part over the individual. Juu unatoa mtu ametoka kuhustle na watu, na saa anajua, watu wamestruggle na mimi, lazima niwasaidie pia hao. Yeah. But tena, it depends. I can't say. Policy corrupts the mind. Because I can give an example without mentioning names. Now the former MP for Embakasi East, he used to be a Makanga, apparently. He got into power and he said, I don't know you guys, bye. Then he didn't help at all. But niliona watu wanarevuka wanasema how to saidi. He was alitolewa. He's not the MP right now. They voted for a new, fresh person. They said they're not doing that thing anymore. So I feel like we need to brainwash, ku-unlearn capitalism slowly by si ati isikue ni tu sahi imekuwa extreme. Everyone ana reason na pesa. Hakuna kitu ingine anyone reasons about, yeah.
No, it was just about the discussion on coffee and how we can just wake up one day and change the policies around coffee. Well, it just shows that we don't highly regard whatever we have. Because in Saudi Arabia yesterday, they told OPEC that you guys can go on and rise and hike the oil prices, but we aren't trading with you, It just shows that they have some leverage that us guys don't have, So again, it goes back to the issue of strong governance and strong leaders, leaders who outrightly from the onset, they fight for their country. That's what we've been lacking for all these years.
Allow me to just contribute one thing. Tamara mentioned what power do we have? Like what can we control as a developing nation? When I look back immediately, when I look at the politics, the election process that has happened in this country, and again, I will go back to a meme that was shared, and in that specific meme, there was There are white news anchors who are just eating maize, actually. And the caption was, BBC news anchors waiting for violence. And yet there was no violence in this country. There is already a perception in the world of the way, or rather of where we are at as Africans. There's already a perception of what we can do. There's already, when you're going to the table and when you're going to the discussion table, it's like you're talking to someone who already knows your worth, you know? And that's why I try and relate this a lot to things to do with to other issues, and I will relate again to relationships. When someone is toxic, when you're in a toxic relationship, the thing that we usually say is you need to move out. Because in a toxic relationship, you're being reminded of the level of who you are. You're being reminded of what you can do. You're being told you're only this much beautiful. You're only this much. This is the only thing that you can achieve. But the moment you remove yourself from that toxic relationship is when you realize, higher, kumbe, I can actually provide. I am actually better than what this person was saying. Bringing it now back to the country. We are in very many toxic relationships, whether we like it or not. And a lot of these toxic relationships came about from the way we were colonized as Africans. And now bringing back to now what Moriri and Harriet have mentioned, yeah? This, with Harriet saying that we need to remove the system, or rather the indoctrination in ourselves that we can't do it. Right now, Congo has joined East African Community. And currently, the East African community is about, 200 million people? That is a large market. That's a very fertile market. A fertile market that, with good leadership, with good policies, we are able to say, okay, instead of selling tea to whoever, let us have our own factories here. Let us make our own brand of tea. I don't know whether Ketepa is Kenyan and authentically Kenyan, but I'll use it as an example. Why can't Ketepa be a multinational? Why do we still have to depend on other coffee? For example, now in coffee, I'll say with Dormans and the likes. Why don't we have a Kenyan brand that is a multinational? Again, it's the thinking that we need them. Aid is great, and support is all great, and the support that developing nations get from developed nations is all great. But we also need to ask ourselves, is this the best that we have? Is this the best that we can get? Yeah? There is so much more that Africans, and Kenya in particular, can develop, can attain if we are allowed to make our own rules, if we are allowed to think, instead of buying a cloth because it's written Versace, can we buy a brand that, or rather, instead of buying Puma, for example, a shoe brand, why aren't we wearing a brand called Enda, which is authentically Kenyan? Kenyan made, Kenyan everything. Instead of having a watch written Nkata, instead of having a watch written Kuwait, why can't you have an Nkata watch? You know?
Tell them.
Why can't you have an Nkata watch? You see, why can't we celebrate our own authentic brands? You see, once we realize that we are in a toxic relationship, is when we will be able to detach ourselves from it. Right now, we see we can't develop without them. We can't do this and that without them. But in truth, if you look at the major progresses that we've done as a country, has little to do with Western support. If you really interrogate it, yeah? Like the level of politics right now that we have in the country, whereby, and I'll say this very strongly, where one political faction, in this case, UDA, was going with the youth narrative. The youth will come out in droves, but the youth, Gen Zs, thank you very much, showing politicians that yes, tutapiga character development. That yes, you can give us that money, tutakula, but we won't still come and vote because you haven't spoken to me as a voter. I think we need to reclaim that strength, reclaim that sense of pride that we have as a country and as individuals.
For me, I'm just agreeing to Mureidi's point of strong governance, and it's effective in Africa. We can't, personally, I don't know. Right now, I've been doing a lot of research about the Zambian president and what he's done in the span of like 1 year. Honestly, this guy vied for presidency 6 times and he never got the presidency. He got it on his 6th time. And right now, he's creating more development compared the 6th. No, I'm talking about the Zambian president. So he right now he's getting more development compared to the leader who's been there for like, I don't know, a span of 20 years. He's literally made the inflation rate go down 1 year. Right now, did you not see his video? He was telling ministers and MPs in parliament, we are not buying for you guys Land Cruisers. We know you can't even afford a Land Cruiser by yourself and you're telling us to buy for you. That money can be used to help the needy. Why are you buying for you? You work hard and buy yourself a Land Cruiser. He told them that and I loved that. And he was like, debt is increasing and there's no development. Why should we buy everyone? No. And then another thing, he's made the currency for Zambia to the US dollar. Like right now, let's say the US dollar is becoming weaker and the Zambian dollar is becoming, I don't know, it's not the Zambian dollar, Zambian something is becoming stronger. That's one leader who's creating so much change. And what I love about him, he tries to attract everywhere where he can. From the news, he goes to the older generation. Twitter, Instagram, he says what he's done. If you don't like it, you tell him. And imagine he'll look and he'll really reply. Ushaiona Uhuru ama mtu yote akisema hivyo ama sijui. Yeah. So I'm just like, I feel like, not to seem rude, I feel like we need a leader who's going to create a lot of change. I can't say right now there is, because everyone has their downfalls, but I don't know, you can have downfalls, but you need to have more. Something stronger than that. We need like, okay, Obama is not perfect, but we need an Obama of 2008. Yes, because if you look at the policies when he reached 2012, we can't say he's perfect, kabisa. So I'll say from 2008, a new fresh person, like, wow, who is this? Who is this? We want to know him. Who is gonna create development? Because now it's just like we're in the same leaders, same things, fightings. It's just a toxic relationship, even the political scene. It's never healthy. I don't know if you're like me. I reached a point when I see politics is too toxic, I don't watch news. I mute anything to do with any politician because it's just like, nah, I don't have the time for it. So I feel like we need a healthy I don't know, it's gonna be our generation. So yeah.
Thank you everyone. I think this section we've talked a lot about leadership, and I just like us to turn back to what Tamara said. We are a democracy also, so we too have power. As Miano is saying, reclaiming our power. I think is the core mission of the decolonial project, because we got physically colonized and we got physically decolonized in the sense that we sent away the colonizers, and sent away. that can be debated, but the idea of colonization and even the idea of cultural supremacy, imperialism, Western imperialism, which are things that, again, Walter Rodney tackles in How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, talking about that direct relationship of exploitation between the West and Africa being the reason that we are underdeveloped, and then them turning around and being like, look at you, you're underdeveloped, and then offering solutions like structural adjustment, like aid that do more to cripple us than they do to help us. So I think a big part of decolonization is that idea of unlearning the cultural imperialism, unlearning the idea that the West is better than Africa just because it's it's modern. Modernization theory of development is more than roads that most of the people can't use, or more than an SGR that's so uncomfortable to travel in for the don't say common one, and I hate that phrase. I hate it so much. for the common person who lives in this country. It's a big call for decolonization, and that's what I did. That's my personal project in life. That's what I did for my research project. I was looking at the historical lens of how we got here, how we got to voter apathy, how we got to being in the situation, as Harriet has mentioned. We don't want to vote, we don't want to engage, and it's just I think for me the eye-opening thing is that these things don't happen by accident. This powerlessness, the being on the receiving end of exploitation, it's not by accident, it's by design. And I'm taken back to the words of Martin Luther King, who said that power is not freely given to the oppressed, it must be demanded. And so for me, I think I'm just wanting to call us into a point of agency, because we have knowledge. We can do political education. We can host spaces like this where we discuss, where we learn together, where we read together, and where we build community, because truly community is all we have. And so the decolonization, as Ngugi wa Thiong'o told us, we need to decolonize our minds. We need to, and I like Sylvia Tamale's distinction between colonization and coloniality. Colonization being the actual process of like another land being taken by another power, but coloniality being the institutions, the ideas, the frameworks that persist beyond that time, even after decolonization, even after gaining independence. We still use the same systems. So I think thinking that, like, taking into account that we are a democracy, I don't think that we can put everything on our leaders, because we choose those leaders, or we choose not to choose those leaders, and in that way to make a decision. So thank you so much for bringing us there, for bringing us to that point, which I think is the heart of this project, trying to create more awareness, trying to create a tool that's more accessible, that can be used for political education, that can be used to start discussions around development, to start thinking about what do we need as Kenyans, not even to start, because there have been people doing this work. We don't want to erase their work. But to continue thinking about what we need and how we can get there. So thank you so much, everyone, for participating in this conversation. And then my last question to all of you would be, if you could, one word in development discourse that you could just remove completely from use, which word would it be? Would you replace it with anything, or would you want it to just be removed? Or, what word would you remove?
Let me start. I think someone can say mine. Dependency. Yeah. It just shows like we need someone so much. I would replace it with interdependent. We all need each other. Not that I need you more. So it shouldn't be one-sided.
Thank you,
I don't know if it's the word in itself, or is it because Dambisa is my best friend? I don't know. But like the whole notion of foreign aid, I think, should just be scrapped off. It's either you're getting a loan that you have to pay back, or you're not getting any money. You can't say that, okay, so it was aid, but then now because we aided you that other time, remember? So now we are pegged around there. No, so it's either it's a loan that I have to pay back, so I have a debt, or I don't have any aid. So maybe foreign aid, or just how the foreign aid plays out could be different.
Yeah, I think for me it would be the concept of the the entire concept of development, and the rankings, especially by the World Bank and the IMF, the least developed, developing countries. That idea of development, of course, is rooted so much in Western hegemonic discourse around what is development, what does it look like, and of course around the erasure of indigenous contributions towards that development. So that, I think that would be it for me. Just a call a call to sitting with the work of Walter Rodney, a call to expand what we think of when we think of underdevelopment and undevelopment, and an attempt even to peel back these myths, this mythology of domination, and to see the things for what they truly are, and then move from there. And with that, thank you everyone for participating in this discussion. It's been really nice, and yeah.
My thoughts on the snippet is when talking about development, and I think we've just mentioned it, we need to separate development from just where you are at financially. That development is a multifaceted idea that really needs to be interrogated as such. And I think one of the speakers there mentioned that there is more to development than just being financially capable to buy whatever, or rather for having purchasing power. Yes, I think that is my comment.
I specifically enjoyed this episode because it touched on things I'm big on, land and labor, and specifically about the Maasai and how they are seasonally moved around from one place to the other. And now specifically in regard to what's happening now in Ngorongoro and in Loliondo, where scores of Maasais are being evicted from their ancestral land. So, funny thing is, I have experienced the evictions by the Maasai because it happens 10 kilometers from where I work. And many of these Maasais work at the lodge I work at. So these are people who we give livelihoods to. And they had to go home because their families were being evicted. So many of them lost their jobs here in Kenya. So again, let me go back to 1904 where the first agreement was made and the Maasais were moved to Laikipia sides and whatnot. And after 7 years, in 1911, they moved them again to Narok and Kajiado. It just shows that in Kenya, land and labor are just tossed around like they don't mean anything. If you think about labor and everything that's been taken to develop the Western culture, that's slave labor, that's African labor, that's our blood, sweat, and tears, And this came at the expense of our own continent. So at the expense of our own growth, we have other people striving. We have the first world because of our efforts, And it comes back now to our country now. We do again, if our labor and our expertise were used to build these Western cultures, then in our own way we can coin our own terms to develop our nation, And it was important to see where the struggle actually began. So from the episode, one of the guys joked that the lions in Tsavo, the man-eating lions in Tsavo, were the first Kenyans to revolt, and I found that interesting because we did not want white people in our land from the onset, because they came first of all for the animals. They destroyed their habitats, and now we have conservancies. Conservancies are owned by white people. Like now, there's a beautiful part of the Masai Mara National Reserve that nobody knows of, because some white people who came 100 years ago are using it as their own conservancy and they aren't paying anything in return. So again, it's time we reclaim what is ours in terms of land and labor, and especially with labor laws. We basically don't have labor laws in Kenya. And if you think about Kotu and Atwoli, like in the episode, a nigga has just been there to kill any laborer's dream, you know, and it's not fair. So with this coming government, I really hope that we'll have stronger trade unions, a stronger civil society, and man, basically just back to our roots. Remember the Young Kavirondo Association, the Kikuyu Association, all these people they envisioned this Kenya right now. And now we must envision another Kenya where everybody is free. Basically, let's make this the land of opportunities, you know. So, yeah, thank you very much.
Hi guys, my episode focused on education and how it relates to culture. The funny thing is, this actually relates to my own experience in life. Let me just start there. It's a personal experience. From the episode, it talks about a girl who doesn't know how to speak Kikuyu and how will she communicate to her grandmother if she dies, let's say, and they meet in heaven. If the grandmother doesn't know how to say hi the way I say hi in English, it talks about how the system has taught them that they just need to learn English, and that is what is their culture, that's their identity. Well, they fully don't really know their identity. Let's say I've done a system that was completely British, like seriously British, and everything I was learning was on the basis of the Western world. And let's say it closed my mind for some years of my life because I would just think about it in terms of the UK needs to help Kenya. We need help from France. We need this and this and this. And what I didn't know, they were eroding myself from my own culture, to be very honest, because why do I need the UK to help me? Why can't I not need a Kenyan to come, put a policy together and create development? So in this episode, I would say the education structure has played a massive role in making people walk away from their real identity. Let's say from my own experience, I'm Luo, and the time I'm starting to actually integrate with my own tribe has been 2 years ago, or let's say 1 year, 2021. It's so serious. That's when I actually knew how to speak my own language, at least now better. I started liking my own language. I started liking my own tribe. I was just like, man, I'm British. I don't want to know anything about my tribe. And now I'm just like, that was so eroded. My tribe is beautiful. Whatever I learn is beautiful. And I feel like such an experience, as exactly as I was saying, it brings you to just how the Europeans live their lifestyle. My world, it just says your world is just about, we need to help Kenya. Development is not there. I need to make money. It gives a bit of an individualistic approach to life. And if I feel like how they've eroded our own culture from the education, right now we are still in the British system. You won't hear a culture subject in the primaries or something like that. And I would love the government to introduce something like that. Let's say you go home for the holiday, come back. Do you know 5 words from your tribe? Do you know this and this and this? What happens? I would love that, because there's still a sense of everyone being eroded by the westernized world. Because trust you me, right now when people get children, the first thing is I want my child to speak in English. I want them to be, and thinking about it, what's up with speaking English? It's not that amazing. And that's my view about it. Yes. Thank you.
So my episode focused on community being all that we have. And what stands out from every single case study that you've looked at is the whole aspect and the whole notion of revolution. So Amy Claire Cabral talks a lot about how we need to somewhat free ourselves from the position that we are in, and the only way we can do so is if we go through a revolution. He talks about how we have been entrapped in our social, political, and economic lifestyles that we don't even realize that much of our culture has been eroded. there's a community in South Africa known as I can't really pronounce it, Ekenana community, which is a self-reliant community that came out. So, for example, if Madar Islam decided to become self-reliant, whereby they have their own schools, their own means of food production, their own means of economic lifestyle. So that's just basically what the Ekanana community has done, created an environment whereby they can rely on each other. They don't need some external forces being the ones to determine how they live their lives day to day. Thomas Sankara also has talked a lot about how everything about us should belong to us and should not be a story for other people to tell. So that's with our epistemology being our knowledge systems. That's to do with race. That's to do with gender. Did I say race? And we're all the same race. That's to do with gender and all that. Like every single thing that makes us who we are belongs to us, and we should be the ones to tell our own story. Now, I believe that community being all we have is one of the most important episodes in the whole project, because it has sort of like come together to aggregate everything else that we talk about, from barter and belonging to arts and education and culture to our economic systems, to us just being the ones who are able to control everything that we have. So yes, that's those are my 2 cents on community being all that we have.